Coin is in Houston. Martin, are you there?
Are big and bright, deep in the heart.
Martin, are you there?
I am here. I am here. Are you making that transition from El Chapo to Stanley Kroenke?
Well, I am not, but you are, I guess.
No, I was just wondering.
Okay, fair enough. We're starting to hear some rumors that there might not be a vote and they might delay it for a couple of weeks.
Well, much like this whole process, you will end up with a concussion, much like the players, but you hear a lot of things. Now, late last night I was told to expect a vote today. That's from a high-ranking league official who said the owners here want to get this decided not only once and for all, excuse me, but also this week, because you have teams that are in the middle of the playoffs. You have 6 teams that are looking for head coaches. There's a lot of stuff that's going on other than L.A. They've met so many times. They've gone back and forth. There's a sentiment here that they want to get this done. But I also think there are plenty who believe the stalemate is real and that Kroenke wants to go to Inglewood. Great. Chargers and Raiders say they're still committed to Carson. Unless there's some kind of brokered settlement here, it could drag on.
It sounds like Spanos wants to be faithful to his Raiders and to that deal he cut with them.
Yeah, and he's been consistent. So he was in the lobby at the Westin last night. They had a little scrum, and there's Howard Hughes, Stanley Kroenke somewhere in the building, never seen. But the Chargers actually had a little dinner meeting, and you could see Mark Davis, the Raiders owner, and Dean Spanos, the Chargers owner, and Carmen Policy, the former 49ers executive, and Bob Iger, who runs Disney, all meeting together. They came out of the meeting, and the questions were asked, and they all consistently said, we're still committed to Carson. Now, whether that's a power play and they're trying to get some leverage out of the league, but pretty consistently, Spanos has said, I don't want to go to Inglewood. And think about it. If you've been waiting for years for a new stadium and you've kind of eyed L.A. as your backup plan, if you can't get something done in San Diego, why do you want to be Stan's little brother in this building, his big dream world that the Rams are going to go in? And the Rams have a better brand, I believe, in L.A. than the Chargers do as far as name value. If I'm Dean Spanos, I just don't know why I want to go into business with Stan.
Then they're also talking about, but it seems, though, that it seems like momentum is building towards that deal. They just got to sweeten the pot big enough for the Chargers to accept it.
So Sam Farmer, who is the NFL writer out of the L.A. Times, he's been pretty front and center, excuse me, on a lot of this stuff. And his quote to me was, "This is coming in this, the sources on that story." He called them agnostic owners, which I love the cryptic NFL language, but saying the ones who don't have a dog in the fight. This is not coming from the Chargers, Raiders, or Rams. These are the owners in cities, and I don't know if they're from Cleveland or Cincinnati, who just kind of want to get it decided. No matter what, they're all going to get a big check. Does it really matter to them who's in L.A.? It doesn't. And he said those are the owners who are sort of pushing for a resolution. Jerry Jones threw it out over the weekend. Hey, let's just do this. Let's get the Chargers and Rams together. Even though the Chargers didn't ask him to propose that, Jerry Jones also stands to make millions and millions of dollars himself off the Inglewood project. He owns Legends, which comes in and does the suites. They do the PSLs. They do the marketing. He'll make multiple millions of dollars in this deal. So if I'm an owner, I would bring that up at some point and say, well, Jerry, you're awfully supportive of this. Is it only because you stand to make money?
So how does this work? Is the vote today, tomorrow? What's going on today, and what's going on tomorrow?
Yeah, so they have meetings scheduled today and tomorrow. Is it possible they conclude today? It is possible. They could just stay all day and hammer it out. It was also suggested 2 things as far as a vote. They could go to a secret ballot where nobody would ever know who voted for whom, which is kind of boring and not what we want to hear. That's on the table right now. And the other theory is that they'll just do it like a jury, where they say, before we even get going here, who thinks he's guilty? Raise your hand. What do you think? And see if the vote's 16-16 or if it's 20-12, and what kind of wiggle room are they close? And if they're so far apart, that's when they may say, you know what, we're going to meet again and continue to talk about this. I don't know what the process would even be properly described as. I've said it before. I mean, the game is great. You watch the playoffs a week, and the game is great, but the league sort of sucks. I mean, they have scandal after scandal. They just screw with city after city. It's just a brutal process, and I think the Rams fans that are left, the ones who aren't either numb or bitter about the process, are just waiting for some resolution. But I think there's a chance today we're going to know something. I don't think that Dean Spanos' answers were as definitive as you would think if somebody was totally. He said, I'm committed to Carson, but I think he's playing a game of poker, and he's trying to get the best deal he can.
He also did he not also say, Martin Kilcoyne live from Houston, the owners' meetings, did he not also say whatever the NFL decides we will abide by?
Yeah, and I guess he has said that throughout, and I don't know if that's giving himself wiggle room, so whatever the result is, he can accept it, or if he's just trying to remind the other owners that he's one of the good guys. He's a faithful owner.
Right.
He's not somebody who's going to backstab, and I think he's got a little personal history. Well, he does have personal history with Stan. They were going to partner together, and Stan bought the land without him. So I just don't know. Hey, all things are fair, I guess, in NFL business and love and war. But if I'm Dean Spanos, and this is the same guy who screwed me over once, now I'm going to go into business with him, and I'm going to essentially be his tenant. I think the amazing thing in this process was that Kroenke, back in late 2015, actually had to bend a little bit. You know, the guy who wants all the toys and doesn't want any of the kids in the neighborhood to play with his toys, had to write a letter and say, okay, who wants to partner with me? I'll cut you a great deal to work with me in the stadium. That was phenomenal for a guy who never bends or gives an inch. I think he's been pushed on this issue. I think he thought he could just walk to L.A. I think that's why people at Rams Park, a lot of them assume they were leaving. There's this theory they've always been gone. But it's not as easy as that because there are other teams in play right now.
Well, and the other thing is now they're floating the idea that they're going to give the Raiders all sorts of money to shut them up, whereas they look at St. Louis asking for a little more money, and it was like, how dare you ask us for any more money?
Right. The question for Roger Goodell is why so hostile towards St. Louis, a city that's making every effort. It may not be perfect. You may want to change some things, but why string them along and then do things like put out the letter publicly to slap Dave Peacock around the day before the aldermen are going to vote, and then let it be known before these meetings, the NFL does not like the stadium plan. Why so hostile towards St. Louis? I think they were in bed with Stan, and it became kind of troublesome that there was a legitimate effort being made to keep them. And that goes against their own guidelines, which are flimsy and, written on paper. But they actually say a team must deal with the city. They must deal with each other in equitable and fair ways. And I think most people that have looked at the process say Stan doesn't care. He doesn't engage at all. And the NFL, at the end of the day, probably doesn't give a crap.
Yeah, all right. You're there for the duration, correct?
Here for the duration, yeah. And Paul Harris is in from 10 to noon today. Carney's in at noon. We'll check in throughout the day. It's sort of an odd thing if you've been covering sports your whole life to sit in a lobby and just sort of chase these. Many of them are kind of hunched over old men who inherited football teams from their dads. It's just a weird dynamic here. But ultimately, they'll go behind closed doors, try and hammer it out. And I think whatever that decision is, people want to know. It is strange, as much animosity as there is towards Stan Kroenke. If he loses here, people in St. Louis are saying, yes, he loses. But then he's probably still wins because somebody's going to throw money at him. And where that is, I still don't know.
All right, Martin, you'll be here all day if something breaks. And, of course, we can hear all your reports on Fox 2 News. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, see you, McGraw.
You got 728 here, Big 550.